So, welcome everybody. My name's Derry and I'm a field engineer here at CircleCI. And today we're going to talk about how continuous integration and continuous delivery are evolving for the AI age and why your traditional CI/CD platform might not be ready for that. In terms of an agenda, we're going to kick it off by quickly exploring the AI-driven development explosion. We're then going to move into the breaking point of traditional CI/CD before quickly getting to why we're all here today, to introduce Chunk and to also demo Chunk's fixing flaky tests capability. However, after that, we will take a look at the broader vision and what is next for Chunk and AI development, agentic AI development at CircleCI before a wrap up and some Q&A. You should all have access to the Q&A functionality in Zoom. So any questions that you do have, feel free to drop them in there. If they're relevant and I can keep an eye on things, I'll answer them as I go, but we will have a lot of time at the end to dive into those questions. So I'm expecting we have about 20 minutes or so of content and then lots of time at the end for Q&A. So don't worry about that. So to kick it off, we're going to talk a little bit about the explosion that we've all experienced in AI-driven development and AI-driven code generation over the past few months. So with AI-assisted coding, developers, as we all know, are shipping way more code. We're seeing teams produce 10 times the amount of commits than they did just 6 months ago. But with that explosion of output, there is a clear challenge. And that challenge is that validation has not kept up. What we're seeing right now, and my CTO Rob used this slide a few weeks ago when this series kicked off, so thank you Rob, as I'm going to leverage this again. But what we're seeing right now is a shift in the flow of the SDLC and what we know in the DevOps space, that is the slowest part of the delivery, isn't just writing code, it's everything that comes after that. And we've continued to speed up this part of the process, the coding phase, thanks to AI. Code generation has exploded, but everything downstream has not caught up yet. And that is creating a bottleneck. Staff engineers are sitting in front of massive PRs trying to review and make sense of all of this AI generated code. This is the problem that we're trying to solve in CI/CD today. We can build faster than ever, but it's not necessarily safer or more reliable. And if we don't actually modernize the rest of the delivery pipeline, the review stage, the testing stage, and the deploy stage, all of that AI generated code can just get stuck in PRs. And the result of that is the speed gains that we've been promised from AI is not there at all. We don't get to, I guess, experience those speed gains. Traditional CI/CD platforms were built for predictable pipelines, not this new reality of AI-driven high-frequency commits. The throughput that we're seeing today in terms of code is crippling many systems that weren't designed for this. And it's not just about the scalability of the CI system, it's also about maintaining quality, governance, and best practices at scale. And that's because even if your builds can run fast, humans are not able to keep up with the validation phase and the validation of all of those changes manually, whether that's in the form of PRs or whatever system that your organization has in place to validate the code that is being pushed through it. And this is where teams can start to hit a wall. It's difficult as you can't just hire your way out of this problem, and you can't just continue to tune different pipelines endlessly. And that is why today that I'm excited to introduce you to something that is going to fundamentally change how CI/CD works. And that is Chunk. Chunk is CircleCI's autonomous validation agent. And as I mentioned, Chunk is going to represent a shift from reactive to proactive CI/CD. And the reason that we're going to see that as Chunk continues to develop is that traditional automation only does what you configure. However, Chunk, on the other hand, works autonomously. It learns your code base, it understands your patterns, and it's going to get smarter with every single run. Moving into Chunk, let's just highlight the fact before I pull up and before we get into the demo, we just want to highlight that Chunk loves toil. So while your team focuses on innovation, Chunk will focus on the tedious stuff. If you think flaky tests, if you think build failures, dependency issues, this is where Chunk can really come in and help your software delivery process. It's going to proactively detect and resolve problems before they begin to slow you down. And it does all of this, most importantly, in alignment with your team's standards and also best practices. Moving into the demo. Okay, let's jump into a live example to begin to see Chunk in action. For those of you who are familiar with CircleCI, you know what page I'm on. This is your pipelines dashboard. And for those of you who are not, let me just give you a quick overview of what's going on here. This is your pipelines dashboard, and this is where you're going to get a bird's eye view of everything going on across your CircleCI organization. You can filter by projects. So let's go down to today's demo application. You can filter by your branch. There's date filters. There's the status of individual pipelines on this page as well. Each box that we see on the screen here now is a pipeline. Pipeline consists of everything that is defined inside your configuration file. That's a config YAML file. That YAML file can live alongside your application code, or it can live in a centralized location, which is absolutely awesome. As you can see here, you can take a look at the different events that might have triggered a pipeline. You can look at the checkout source, see the Git SHA. There's some different kind of capabilities here in terms of rerunning pipelines, etc. But this is kind of your homepage, if you like, for CircleCI, or one of your homepages when you want to understand what's going on across your build system. One level down from the pipeline, we have a workflow, basically just a job orchestrator, which allows you to introduce a dependency matrix, and each of these boxes is a job. Okay. This is the execution and the resource class. This is a Docker medium image, and these are all the steps defined to be carried out within that job. But let's jump back and get back into our story today, which is Chunk and our flaky test capability, okay? So this is a simple app. It's called Flaky To-Do List, and it's a small project, but it is full of flaky tests. And we can thank AI for that, because this was all generated with the help of it. Well, this application was generated with the help of AI. We can see that on a scheduled pipeline that the first run carried out, there was back-end failures, and there was also end-to-end failures in our testing suite. With an automatic rerun, there was just failures on the back end, again of an automatic rerun. Our back end test failed. I think you get the idea. The next run, we saw our integration tests fail. The next auto rerun, our integration test passed, but our end-to-end test failed. And then finally, on our fifth attempt, everything passed. And I think it's fair to say that this is the definition of flakiness, and CircleCI has identified different flaky tests from within the suite. And that's because when you run your build pipelines on CircleCI and store those test results with us, we're going to keep track of those results. And if we detect that they are flaky, basically what we're determining here is that if a test will pass or fail on the same Git SHA, and I think that's a fair indication if a test is flaky or not. Okay? So what we can see here is that, yeah, as we walked through already, is that sometimes these tests pass, sometimes these tests fail. And if we jump into the individual job, first off, you can find out the test failure by looking at the logs. You can leverage AI here to actually help you explain this test failure. But there's also options up here to help you address mean time to recovery, okay? So you can rerun the workflow from the start, from failed, you can rerun a job at SSH. Something really cool to point out is you can rerun just your failed tests. If we have 1,000 tests, only 10 of them fail, let's just rerun those failed tests. Okay, so some strong capabilities there to address mean time to recovery. But again, jumping back into our chunk story, in the testing tab, this is where you can start to analyze those individual tests that may have failed. However, to look a bit deeper into your test suite overall and to really understand what chunk is going to leverage to offer some fixes to your failed tests, let's look at our testing insights. And as I'm kind of walking through this, maybe just ask yourself in your current CI setup, for those who are using CircleCI, are you leveraging your testing insights? And for those who are not using CircleCI today, are you able to understand what's going on in your testing suites and the bottlenecks that can come with those suites? Okay, so off the bat, we can see the amount of flaky tests that exist inside that exist on this project. We can also understand standard test failures and information around slowest tests. Okay, so here you can see information around your most failed tests, your slowest tests, and different data points around them. But let's focus on the flaky tests for today. And here are a list of the 10 flaky tests that CircleCI has identified and the amount of times that these tests have flaked. Okay, and also at the top here, what we can see is that there is a lot of red, a lot of inconsistent results. Now, take a step back and imagine this at enterprise scale or a production-ready application, at the scale of a production-ready application. 100 times the amount of code and 100 times the amount of flakiness. That is a nightmare for developer velocity. So now we're at the point where we have identified, and CircleCI has helped you identify the flaky tests that are within your suite. But this is really where Chunk can step in and go to the next step to actually do something about those flaky tests. Okay, so jumping over to the Chunk UI, you can open the tasks UI here, and the first thing to note is that Chunk is constantly analyzing your test results. You can run it nightly, you can run it weekly, or you can run it monthly. And when it detects a flaky test, it automatically creates a task, just like this one that we see on the screen here now. Chunk is going to dig into the test failures. It's going to identify patterns like race conditions, missing weights, unreliable API mocks, and then it's actually going to go and propose a fix. And it's going to propose a fix in the form of a PR. And you can access that PR just by clicking this button up on the top right. And what's important to note here is that nobody had to lift a finger. Chunk ran overnight. It found the flaky test. It fixed it. It validated it. And then it opened up a PR that is ready for review. It validated the change in the form of a CI pipeline that you can define. And then as I mentioned already, it proposed a fix in the form of a PR that is ready for your developers for review when they come into work or when they log on to work the next morning. So instead of developers needing to chase down non-deterministic bugs, they start their day with fixes ready to merge. If you want to go deeper into what Chunk is doing under the hood, you can view the logs of Chunk's conversation with your LLM, whether that's Claude, OpenAI, or another model. You just plug in your API token and Chunk handles the reasoning and the validation automatically. It's a bring your own key model. So instead of CircleCI requesting to the model, it's simply just to bring your own key. In terms of setting up a chunk task, like the one that we just looked at, it's very simple. We can just hit the assign a new task button. You can choose the project that you want chunk to run on. You can schedule the frequency, which we already discussed, and you can begin to set different limits, like the maximum test to fix per run. This is going to basically limit how many failing tests the agent will attempt to fix in a single execution. There's the maximum solutions to try per test. So basically for each failing test, this is going to determine how many different fix attempts the agent can make. We can also look at the number of validation runs per test. So basically after applying a fix, the agent will run this test this many times to validate that it consistently passes. And then, of course, the maximum number of concurrent PRs that Chunk can open on a given project. Again, maybe wanting to limit that toil on some of your engineers whose job it is to, I guess, manage what can and cannot be merged into your production-ready branch. If you need to customize what Chunk is going to do in this, you can do so by leveraging the CCI agent setup.yaml file. And there's also the ability to provide Chunk with some post-run commands. What you can do then is basically start a task, save it, and then Chunk becomes part of your ongoing CI/CD routine. Just taking a look to see if I see any questions coming through. Jumping back over to what's next. So today, Chunk's focus is simple, but it is very powerful. So it automatically repairs flaky tests, and it is the fastest way to restore that trust in your pipelines and reclaim wasted developer minutes. But it's important to note that this is just the foundation, okay? As I mentioned at the top of the call, Chunk's real mission is autonomous validation, fixing things where it's everybody's problem, but it's nobody's job. And what's cool, and what I hope will get some of your attention today, is where we're planning to go with Chunk next. The first thing I want to highlight is the adaptive testing piece, or selective test execution. And this is going to be massive. This is where Chunk is going to identify exactly which tests are impacted by a given code change and only run those tests. So this means no more full suite runs on every commit, just test what matters. Very useful on feature branches, on development branches, when developers just need to get feedback as quickly as possible on a change. Maybe not something that we want to leverage all the time or leverage in our production branches, as we want to validate everything, but that depends on the software delivery practices of your organization, I guess. But this is going to be massive. We're going to see massive reductions in test time. For large test suites on internal applications that we're testing at the minute with a lot of parallelization already, with leveraging a lot of parallelization as well, we're talking about cutting 30-minute testing suites down to about 1.5 minutes. Again, just to emphasize that what we're seeing internally at the minute, we're seeing 30-minute test runs down to about 1.5 minutes. We're also going to explore build failure remediation. This is where Chunk will start to automatically diagnose and repair common build issues. Think of dependency version mismatches, missing environment variables, or even misconfigured steps, all fixed before a human ever needs to touch it. There is exploration also going on around security and CVE remediation. So thinking about tools like Sneak or Trivy when they flag vulnerabilities. Chunk isn't going to just report them. It's actually going to proactively suggest dependency upgrades or patches. And final thing to note is the exploration of coverage improvements. So if test coverage drops below a certain threshold, Chunk is going to suggest where coverage might be thin, or even auto-generate tests to help fill those gaps. And all of this is to keep teams consistently shipping with quality confidence and not just speed. We're really starting to, I guess, enter an era where the validation layer in your CI/CD pipeline can become self-maintaining, self-healing, and also continuously improving. And that's some of our vision for autonomous validation. Shipping at AI speed, but with that human level confidence. Believe that is all we had in terms of content today. So to wrap it up before I open up Q&A, I do see some questions coming in, so we will get to those in a minute, and we've lots of time to answer them, which is great. But to wrap up, AI has completely changed how fast we can write code, but the validation has not caught up. CircleCI Chunk starts to bridge that gap by letting you ship as fast as AI can generate, all while maintaining the governance, the quality, and the confidence that you need in your software delivery processes. Teams are using Chunk today, and the feedback has been fantastic. If you want to get Chunk up and running in your own environment, the first steps to get access to the Chunk Early Access program, just reach out to your point of contact at CircleCI. You can join the waitlist and you can connect your CircleCI project and to your preferred LLM provider. And then all it is setting up your first Chunk task, and then we are off to the races. Again, thank you for joining today. I appreciate the high attendance, and now we're going to open up some Q&A. So I'll jump in to take a look at some of those questions now. So I see one question: do we have to use the model defined by CircleCI, or are we able to give it another source when we're already hosting a bunch of models? So as so in terms of leveraging Chunk, basically you're going to provide an API token to the model that you want to use under the hood. So if you're using OpenAI, Claude, or etc. under the hood already, and you want to use that model, that's what you're going to be able to use. So CircleCI, you'll just provide the API token, and that's the model that CircleCI is going to use under the hood. So how do we control the next question from Eric, how do we control how my repository code is handled and how it's shared within CircleCI systems when Chunk runs? So that's a great question. And Chunk is going to be, as I mentioned already, as I went through the process, Chunk is built on top of CircleCI's existing test intelligence features. So when you run build pipelines in CircleCI and store those test results with us, we will keep track of those results and detect if those tests are flaky, basically around the kind of git sha. If the same test fails, if the test fails and passes in the same git sha, we're going to identify that as flaky. And Chunk has access to that information via the CircleCI API. And then we will have a GitHub app that has write access to the repository. So you will need to install the GitHub app, which you would then install and authorize basically, and then Chunk can make changes to your repo. Chunk will check out code the same way CircleCI always does. But one thing that is important to note is that Chunk will not be training on the data of the source code. So it's only at runtime that it's going to be able to leverage it. So I hope that answers your question, Eric. So there's another question here. So when you said that speaking with Chunk to view the changes is a bring your own key model, do we need to bring an LLM API key to Chunk to use as the base code? And the answer to that is yes. So you do need to bring an API key to whatever LLM that you want to leverage or that you want Chunk to leverage under the hood. In terms of languages that are supported, I believe To my knowledge, I'm not, I don't, I'll need to dive into this a little bit deeper, but to my knowledge, as long as the LLM is able to process and I guess provide feedback on the different languages that you're talking, different languages and frameworks that we're talking about, Chunk is going to be able to handle those. I believe the initial tests, a lot of them have been kind of node-based languages, but to my knowledge, and it's something that I can confirm, we're going to be able to support a wide suite of languages. And then in terms of cost, so that's a great question. And I believe in the beta period, which we are still in for another couple of weeks anyway, there are going to be no additional costs and it will run as compute credits. So there are basically compute credits that you will have if you're a CircleCI customer, and they will be charged for it. I did mention it's a bring your own key model, so there will be tokens that you will, I guess the LLM, there will be a cost on that side, depending how many chunk runs there are, etc. There might also be inference costs associated with the model, but we do that mainly for security and privacy reasons. And then in the future, based on how we fix tests in the future, that's where pricing is going to come in. But we don't have any official pricing on that available at the minute. There's a great question. Did we use Chunk in CircleCI development? We definitely didn't use it in the initial phases, but I can assure, as for obvious reasons, I think we've been around since 2013, so and Chunk is brand new. However, it is definitely being actively used in the CircleCI organization at the minute, which is absolutely great. So yeah, we're definitely using Chunk in our development and in our production environments in our repositories today for sure. Pricing model. In terms of setting up a point of contact moving forward, um, I think, Daniel, if you're not, oh, if you don't already have a point of contact at CircleCI, I believe just going to our homepage, I'm not sure if I'm going to be, if you just go to our homepage at circleci.com, there is a little ask, I think it's a contact sales button down at the bottom right-hand corner. If you enter your information in there, somebody from our end will reach out. But the fact that you have attended this webinar, the fact that you're here, you will get correspondence from CircleCI on Chunk and on Chunk going forward, so no problem there. So there's another question here. So can we set some rules for chunk tasks so its interaction with the selected model follows those said rules? That's a good question. And today, I don't believe so. You are able to basically define the pipeline that will run to validate chunks changes, but I don't believe that today we're able to basically customize what chunk can do in an individual tasks or how it can interact with the LLM. However, that is a great question. It's also awesome feedback, Antonio. And that's probably something that we should also highlight here, that our product team and our engineering team developing these capabilities are always looking for feedback and always looking for the way that the market wants certain products to go, and even design partners, etc. So if you do, that is a great question that I'm going to go and ask that product team. However, if this is something that we see that the market wants, this is where we will shift our focus to. So appreciate the question, Antonio, and something that I will be able to dig into. I think we're starting to level out in terms of questions coming through. We'll give it another 30 seconds or so just to see. see if anything else comes through, but I do really appreciate all of the engagement in the Q&A. I appreciate you all coming, logging on today and joining the call and understanding a little bit about where CircleCI is going in terms of helping folks helping folks with the validation phase of this AI boom. I see more questions coming through. Yeah. So, Sonia, in terms of dependency checking, this is something that we're exploring in terms of next capabilities with Chunk. And I think I mentioned some of them already. So, just in terms of where we're looking to go next, it's the selective test execution or the adaptive testing, it's build failure remediation, security and CVE remediation, coverage improvement, etc. There is internal testing ongoing at the minute around natural language interface where you're actually able to talk to Chunk about work, I guess, as work in human speak. So there is quite a bit ongoing about where we're looking to explore next. Um, but I think the next thing that we're really looking to focus on is that adaptive testing piece. Again, that selective test execution. Okay, I think we can begin to call it a day, folks. I don't see any more questions coming through. I see the numbers of participants starting to drop down. So again, really appreciate you folks jumping on today. I hope you got an insight into where we're looking to go, CircleCI, in our current phase, in the current agentic development. But yeah, thank you again for joining today and hope to hear from you all soon.